Welcome to episode 1 of You Better Call Your Lawyer, Pal. Oh, Eric, thanks for coming.
Sure, thanks for having me.
This is my friend and attorney, Eric Vallone. So this whole thing came about because I made a video about offer deadlines, and you were kind enough to comment that a home seller can take an offer whenever they'd like, which I agree with. But I understand that the New York State's legal process versus what BNR requires are two totally different things. But do you want to elaborate on that? Is that
So yeah, I mean, basically, a seller can do what they want. I mean, you can say, hey, we're going to take offers for a week or 10 days or whatever. And if the first offer comes in and the seller says, hey, I want this one, they're the boss. I mean, it's not. Selling real estate is not everyone gets a fair shot. You can't discriminate because of race and sex and religion, those kinds of things. But
certainly
otherwise, it doesn't. You can negotiate with anyone. You don't have to counter offer. You just if the seller says, and the thing is, people's situations can change.
Sure.
The seller could have found out about a job transfer and hey, I need to sell this house today, not, a week from now.
Right.
Totally.
So it's BNR police, which I mean, I think that's a good thing. I think that someone's holding agents to a standard. Like if we're gonna publish an offer deadline.
Yeah. Obviously, BNR has a different incentive. They want people to. They want people to play fair as much as they can.
Of course.
So that their rules are designed to encourage that. So yeah, that totally makes sense.
Totally. Very good. I like it. Have you ever had that happen where you've had a seller be like, we're going to do this even though?
So I mean, yeah, I've had sellers entertain other offers even when paragraph 20 says they won't. I mean,
of course.
Yeah, not really enforceable. I mean,
right.
It's New York, so the contract has to have the attorney approval clause, and you have that period that, you can.
It's no man's land.
Yeah, you can cancel a deal for any reason or no reason. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to tell them why.
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, all those things have happened.
So it's I mean, it's along the same lines of I love when people put on page 8, must stop showing surprise. It's the only recourse you have is to cancel. And if you want to cancel, go ahead. We're going to keep showing. That's
I mean, I mean, so I'm sure some people, it makes them feel, gives them kind of a moral obligation.
Sure.
Hey, that's great. It doesn't hurt anything putting it in there.
Right.
And I tell buyers hey, it doesn't really mean anything. Can't do anything about it, but
there it is.
If it works, cool. If it doesn't, hey.
Oh well. Right.
Yeah, it's the same as not having anything in there. So
totally.
Might as well give it a shot.
Exactly. No, I agree. So why? So we're in New York State, obviously. Why does a buyer or seller need legal representation, and why does each side need their own representation?
So, I mean, really, buyers and sellers need representation. One, to protect realtors, really, because there was a case many years ago. A realtor was accused of the unauthorized practice of law, which is a misdemeanor in New York. And the resolution of that case really was, realtors can't draft contracts unless they're just filling in pre-approved forms and there's an attorney approval clause.
Great.
So that's why we have the BNR form contract that we all use. And really, I mean, the attorney's job is, to make sure the contract is good, that the seller and buyer understand what they're getting into. Make sure the title to the house is clean, no mortgages, liens, easements, etc. And then to conduct the closing.
Sure.
And, really, I mean, you need an attorney because, in New York, attorneys are the only ones that are allowed to draft deeds.
Sure.
Why that is, I don't know, but that's
is it different elsewhere?
I believe title companies can draft them other places,
So that's a fascinating, and Tyler and I even thought about making a relatively challenging video about this whole thing. But so I see it takes forever to close. And from what I understand, like you go to Florida, you can buy a house in 2 weeks. And so like what is it about New York State that it takes that much more time? And is it
So
fixable?
so it is fixable.
Okay.
I don't know that you'll get to 2 weeks, but here in Western New York, at least, we have title searches, whereas in Florida, they just do everything on title insurance. So in Florida, you buy a house, somebody bought it, 5 years ago. They basically piggyback on that owner's title insurance policy that's 5 years old. They look at the 5 years in between and basically don't look at anything before that.
Sure.
Here in New York and Western New York specifically, we don't really have that history of everybody buying title insurance. Even I mean, I see attorneys today that are closing deals without title insurance.
That seems crazy.
I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't do it, but
Yeah.
so you don't necessarily know, and that mortgage from 30 years ago that wasn't paid off and somebody just woke up and realized it, could still be an issue even if it was 3, 4, 5 owners ago.
Sure.
So basically, kind of having to go and redo that work is why title takes so long.
Sure.
The other thing is, it's antiquated. We're still using physical title searches. And a title search is just a listing of the documents that affect the title to the property. We have a title standard that says they got to start before 1920. So if you lose it, if the seller loses it or it's an estate or something and they don't have it, the title company's got to go and do all that work and go to the Erie County Clerk's office and go in the basement and look through the old books and
Sure.
and I mean
Look through the old books. Like literally, like go down.
There's there's giant books and you pull them out and you see copies or handwritten transcribed copies of the old documents and that is that's work that's expensive, but it's also not very lucrative for the title company. I mean, they kind of the market won't let them really charge what they probably should for that stuff, so it tends to get stuck to the bottom of the pile. And I mean, I think in the last few years, especially, most buyers and sellers are buying title insurance policies, and maybe someday we'll get to a little quicker process. But
Sure. Yeah, I just always wondered about that. I didn't know if it was, like you said, antiquated or if it was just, I know that things get snail mailed around. That's, yeah. But,
yeah, I mean, I've tried to, and I'll probably still try until I'm not doing it anymore to
sure.
change things, speed things up. I mean, even if we could get to electronic title searches, if there's just a repository somewhere.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
Is what it is.
that would certainly help if I could just send an email somewhere and say, hey, can I have, Jane Smith's title search for, 25, Cherrywood Place or whatever. And, instead of having to call her and be like, hey, remember 10 years ago when you bought that house? And then like 6 months after that, you got a letter and it probably came certified mail and it had this book-like thing. And,
Yeah.
Can you bring that to my office?
Yeah. I bought my house 18 months ago. I still don't have my title. Who knows?
Yeah.
Luckily, I plan to be there for a while, but
Sure.
Yeah.
Certainly happens. I mean, with COVID, everything, in the real estate market's been so crazy. The title companies are so backed up that that's the lowest priority work. And
yeah. So I've been doing this since 2016, and I feel so old when I tell people that I remember going down to the clerk's office and like I used to stand there with my buyers and two attorneys looking at each other and physically doing, and like I had to give instructions for that. And I feel like that's going to be one of those different, like in 20 years when I'm telling people that, they're going to be like, how old are you? Like, because that went away with COVID, right? That was it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And, the clerk's office basically, they haven't said this in so many words, but they've kind of said it. It's like, hey, you ain't ever coming back. We took all the tables with seats out except for one or two for handicapped people. There's high top tables there. Like, we're gonna make it as uncomfortable for you as possible.
Right.
You know, and I'm sure they're gonna turn that space into, you know, into something else.
Yeah, Jamal making apartments.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be a restaurant soon or something.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, and you know, I mean, I think it works out for the better. I mean, you know,
Yeah. I agree.
certainly some bumps in the road, but it's much easier to go to an attorney's office and,
No question.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
you know,
Exactly.
and just close there than, you know, having 100 people also closing their deals.
Dude, it was loud in there. It was loud in there. For those of it, the people might not know what we're talking about. So you used to for almost every closing. Every closing?
Most of them, yeah. I mean, if there was a bank involved, you know.
Yeah, you would physically go down to the city clerk's office and you would sit. There's this giant room with all these tables, and it was like first come, first serve.
Yeah.
Just chaos. And you had to find your attorney, and then you sit down with the other side's attorney, and that's where you signed all the paperwork. And it's like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, and there were like 20 of them. So funny story, when my wife and I bought our house in
Yeah.
2015,
Yeah.
my wife wanted kind of the full closing experience.
Okay.
And you
You
know,
probably love that.
I was like, hey, you know, let's do it.
Yeah.
So we're closing on a Friday in October. It was super busy.
Yeah.
And you know, literally we're like signing the documents, and I'm like closing a deal 2 tables over, and I'm just like, people are just coming up to me, and my wife just looks at me and she's like, is this okay? Should we like do this another time? I'm like, yeah, it's fine. Like, it's always like this.
Yeah. Always. Yeah.
She's just like, okay. She's like, yeah, next time we'll not do this.
Yeah. We like remote now. Yeah. Right. Yeah. For sure. For sure.
But yeah, it was certainly crazy back then.
Yeah, well, hey, yeah, that's like I said, I'm sure that probably already ages me that I was involved in that. Like in 20 years, it's gonna be a whole
Sure,
thing,
sure.
you know.
But you know, but you also used to get to see all the attorneys too, you know,
Right.
which doesn't happen anymore.
Right, big social thing for
Yeah.
sure. Yep. And that's you probably knew everyone at the clerk's office. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you know, I mean, occasionally it would be helpful because, like, if you had to deal with that person, it was, you had that familiarity, which, you know, eventually probably go away.
Sure, totally. So to that point, when I go to a listing appointment, I ask the seller, "Do you know where your title paperwork is? Can I take that now so I can bring it to the attorney's office?" Is there anything similar to that like a buyer or seller can do from the legal perspective to kind of be more prepared or just make things smoother?
I mean, honestly, that's the biggest thing. Like getting the title search up front, you know, getting it to the attorney, getting the search ordered. And if they don't have it, you know, just getting it, or the faster you get it ordered, the faster you get it back.
Sure.
I mean, there are other things you can do. I mean, you know, like I said, the standard title search begins before 1920. You can get title insurance on a shorter search, a 60-year search or a 40-year search in some cases. So, you know, you can do that. I mean, you want to be careful with doing that because, you know, there are some neighborhoods, you know, where there are old restrictions on properties and stuff that people still enforce, even though they're 100 years old.
Cough, Allentown.
Allentown Central Park is
Sure.
a big one.
Yeah.
You know, and then the other thing too is, you know, it's the other thing to keep in mind, vacant land is more complicated if somebody's going to build. You know,
Sure.
you need to know if there's a gas pipeline like running through that land, or there might be, you know, because you gotta find it.
For sure.
Before somebody, you know, tries to put their house over it, and then they got a big problem.
Big problem. Yeah, for sure. Have you ever had like I don't know, I'm sure you've had plenty of horror stories you can't share. Are there like any horror stories that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, we've had, you know, all kinds of things. I mean, you know, mineral rights, you know, are often a big thing, like free gas.
Sure.
We had a buyer who purchased a house, and the seller was getting free gas, and
Because they were on a well.
yeah, so there was a well that wasn't on that property, but the seller owned a larger parcel and earlier had subdivided it, took the right to the free gas.
Interesting.
And then the free gas went to the buyer, but it wasn't supposed to, and it was a whole
Right.
it was a whole thing. You know, but yeah.
So does title insurance cover that? Like how does that?
Well, I mean, really, it was a mistake on the seller's part. So the seller kind of
Sorry.
lost on that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, lots of. I had a commercial deal last year or the year before, where there was a gas pipeline running down the side of the building that my clients were buying, and I kind of said like, hey, this thing's here, and they're like, well, what can we do about it? And I'm like, kind of nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess we could try to see if they'll move it, but I'm guessing we're not going to get very far.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they kind of decided to close, and a lot of times that's what it comes down to is like, hey, this is a thing, here it is, and if you want to cancel the deal, we probably can, but if you want to buy this building,
This is what it is.
This is it.
Yep.
This is it.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Cool. I'll throw one more curveball at you. There's no wrong answers here, but and some people are like, I hate Buffalo. Some people are really passionate about it. But is there any particular reason you like Western New York? You grew up here?
I did grow up here.
Okay.
Yeah, been here all my life, and I do like it here. Like, I think there's a lot to do. Like, I think, even before the last 10, 15 years where there was a lot more.
Boom.
Yep. Big concert guy, big, arts and
Correct.
stuff. So,
Yeah, totally.
just always liked it, kicked around leaving, kicked around going to law school out of town.
Sure. Yeah.
And I was like, well, why spend $250,000 for something I could spend $60,000 on?
Right.
Especially since, I was planning on coming back anyway, I mean,
Right. Totally.
there are some legal jobs that I just would never get, but, I didn't want those jobs, and
Right. Yeah, totally.
and nobody cares where I went to law school, really.
Yeah. I can imagine. That's yeah, unless you're, litigating in Manhattan or some shit. But
Yeah,
that's,
or
yeah.
if you want to get on the Supreme Court someday.
That's right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's not where I'm going with my life. So.
It's fair. Lifelong Western New Yorker. We like that.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you doing this. This
Sure.
is this has been good. Tyler, you got anything else to add? No? Cool. Very good. Thanks, brother.
Awesome, man. Anytime.
Cool. Well, let's wrap it.